Hello everybody, today we're going to be learning about the biological levels of organization. In the Level 2 textbook this is on page 21, and in the honors book this is on pages 5 and 6. This is the final idea that you need to know for chapter 1, so let's take a look at what it's talking about. What this idea is really talking about is the different levels of biology that we can study in this course, and how different groups of organisms and pieces of organisms can be organized together so that we can better study them. So we're going to start here with the smallest. In biology, what's the smallest idea that you can study? Well, the smallest thing that we could study would be atoms. You all probably remember atoms from some previous year. They have a nucleus made of protons and neutrons. They have electrons orbiting that nucleus. They can combine to form pure elements, and that's the smallest thing that we can really study. If we go a little larger than that, we can study molecules. Molecules are specific combinations of atoms, and let me give you a few examples. One would be H2O. We have 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. That's an example of a molecule. Another simple molecule would be like carbon dioxide. 1 carbon atom with 2 atoms of oxygen, so CO2. So we can study molecules, and we will talk about different molecules this year. If we want to go a little bigger than that, we can study macromolecules. Macro just means big, and we're going to study some important macromolecules this year. So water and CO2 are smaller molecules, we just call those molecules, but macromolecules would be something like DNA. It's made of thousands, millions of atoms all put together in a very specific way, and that's called a macromolecule. Another macromolecule would be something like a carbohydrate. And we're going to study lots of different macromolecules that cells need, living things need, and that way you know what they are. They're larger than molecules. They're called macromolecules, and macro just means big. If we put macromolecules together with molecules in very specific combinations, we can go even larger, and we can create a cell. A cell has very unique properties. A cell is the smallest unit of life. If you take a living thing and break it down to the smallest part of it that's still alive, then you have a cell. If you break a cell apart, then you lose that life. So the cell is the smallest unit of life, and that's just how it is. Okay, your book may have a slightly different definition, and that's fine, but we'll be studying cells in quite a bit of detail because we're studying living things, so we have to understand how their smallest pieces work. Now, cells can organize themselves in different ways depending on the creature. We're going to be a little generic here. If we want to study something bigger than a cell, we can study groups of cells. And what that means is cells can group themselves together into tissues sometimes. Tissues can group themselves together to form organs. Some creatures have organ systems like we do, like your nervous system and those sorts of things. So those would be groups of cells, and we can study those. We probably won't study groups of cells all that much this year, but in a class like anatomy and physiology, which you could take your junior or senior year, we focus on groups of cells quite a bit because that's what we're studying. The human body, its different systems, its different organs, how everything works. So that's obviously a field of biology larger than a cell. Now, if we put all of the different organ systems together with the different tissues and organs, we can get something even bigger, and we can get an organism. An organism is just an individual living thing. So obviously we can study different kinds of organisms. We could study bacteria, we can study animals, plants, fungus, different types of organisms we could absolutely study. Okay, I'm out of room here, so I'm going to go to the next screen, but we're just going to continue here from organism. And obviously we can study more than just an organism here in this class. We can study groups of organisms. And if we study, let me write it down here, population, If we study a group of the same kind of organism living in the same place at the same time, now we're studying a population of that organism. Kind of like in social studies, you can study the human population. The population of Clark Summit in 2015 is all the people living in Clark Summit in 2015. So it's an area of one kind of living thing at a certain time. That's what a population is. So let me jot this down for you because you do need to know this. So this would be group of organisms of one type living in an area at the same time. Okay, we can obviously study more than just one kind of creature. So, say we're studying white-tailed deer in Lackawanna County. So we're studying the population of white-tailed deer. Well, in studying the deer, we're going to find, well, wait a minute, we have to study more stuff. We can't just study deer. We have to study the coyotes because the coyotes are predators on the deer. We have to study people because people are predators on deer. We have to study different plant populations that these deer will eat. So as soon as we start studying other populations of other creatures, now we're studying the community. All right, a community is a bit different than a population. A community are all the populations in an area and how they interact and everything. So we'll say populations that live together in a defined area. In a defined area. You can study the community in your backyard. You can study all the different plants living in your yard, all the different populations of insects, populations of earthworms, squirrels and chipmunks and deer that come through your yard. That would be the community of your backyard. This defined area, you define it. You can study your backyard, your neighborhood. You could study Lackawanna County. You could study the state of Pennsylvania. So this is going to be defined based on the scientist, exactly what is their scope of what they're defining. Now, if you take a look at here at the community is only talking about what we call the biotic factors. Biotic factors has the word bio right in it. So this is only studying the living parts of an area. Well, you all know if you're doing biology, you have to take into account the non-living, like temperature, rainfall, different chemicals, pollution, things like that. Once you do that, now you're studying the ecosystem. Okay, ecosystem is the community, so all the living parts of an area, plus the abiotic factors. Okay, so that would be the ecosystem. So if we're studying the white-tailed deer in Lackawanna County, we have to study the different seasons we have here, different pollution, geological formations, all those things go into studying the ecosystem. And obviously, these abiotic, when you put A in front of a word, that means not biotic. So these abiotic, well, that was really dark. These abiotic factors, they obviously affect the living things. Okay, we can still go bigger than an ecosystem. There's one more level higher. Actually, there's two more levels. I'm sorry. The next level would be a biome. A biome would be ecosystems that are found all over the world. Like, let me give you an example. Like a desert would be a biome. Deserts aren't just found in one place on our planet. They're found in different places along the equator. So even though a desert is an ecosystem, it's the community plus these different abiotic factors, there's deserts found all over the world. So we would call that a desert biome. We live in a biome called a deciduous forest. That means that we live in a forest where the leaves get dropped every year. Okay, deciduous means to shed. So that's the biome that we live in. So biome would be ecosystem that is found in different parts of the world. And we'll do a project on biomes this year. You'll all research one and we'll do some kind of presentation or some kind of project about it to help you learn a specific kind of biome in detail. Now, if we want to study all of the biomes, every single place on this world that can support life, we're studying the biosphere. Let's break down the word. Sphere means like globe. Bio means living. So it's the living part of our Earth. So the biosphere is not the entire planet, because in the middle of the planet, no life can live there. It's only the Earth's crust, a little bit below, where different insects and mammals can burrow down, and then the tops of the trees, and where bacteria can live, and birds and things like that. So the biosphere, we'll say, is the portion of Earth that can contain life. So that's what the biosphere is. So we won't be studying the entire biosphere. We'll study biomes and different parts of them. Obviously, we'll talk about different ecosystems as the year goes on, especially when we study ecology. We'll obviously talk about how communities can affect each other. And then obviously, we're going to talk about populations. Okay, you have one creature, how their type of creatures can survive. Let me go back a screen. And then you guys will become experts on cells. We'll also be talking about macromolecules quite a bit. We'll do a whole thing about genetics, talking about DNA for a couple months. So this is really a game plan of what we're going to be studying this year. Some of the smallest grouping that we can study are atoms. We can gradually build on that and get larger, larger, larger. And the largest thing, the largest thing we can study is the biosphere. All right, now let me show you a visual from the Level 2 book. The Honors book doesn't have a really clear picture of this, but the Level 2 book does a really nice job. So this is found on page 21 of the Level 2 book. They've left off a couple areas here. They start down here with molecules. Look down here at the bottom. We started here with atoms. Then we said atoms get to put together in certain ways with chemical reactions to make the molecules. And then we said macromolecules over here, like the double helix DNA would be a big molecule, a macromolecule. We said all these things get put together to make cells. And then we said cells can piece together to make different groupings of cells. These different levels of cell groupings get to put together to make an organism. Similar organisms can live together, like these buffalo here, to make a population of buffalo. When you take into account the other living things that live with the buffalo, now you're talking about a community. So we have these hawks and this different grass and things like that. This is all part of their ecosystem. This would include rainfall and temperature and every other non-living thing. Remember, non-living we called abiotic. Every other non-living thing around this community. We also said right here, we stuck in a level called biome. So the biome here that these buffalo are living in, this is called a grassland or a prairie or a savanna. It's all the same thing. So they live in a grassland biome. If you put all the portions of our planet together that can support life, now you're talking about the biosphere. All right, so please watch this as many times as you need to, and take a look at your textbook too, and ask me lots of questions if you're stuck.